A space where participants feel welcomed, respected, and able to speak comfortably will uphold the following principles in all convenings of the Council. And we ask that all participants, which includes council members, authorized representatives, staff, moderators, and the public, work towards sharing in their stewardship. If you're a participant in a convening with the Council, we ask that you engage in the work of the Council and with each other in an open, respectful way. Engage in behaviors that will make others feel welcome. Take care of your emotional, mental, spiritual, and physical well-being, and seek support as you need it. If I need to remind you about what all of that means, I'll remind you later in this convening. And I may need to ask people if you are feeling like you are having feelings that you want to express, but you need a breath to think about it and process it and come back to the circle to engage in a respectful way where we can talk to each other. I may ask you to step away for a minute. And for those of you who are not from the community and it feels like we're getting into a strange space, I may ask you to also step away and we can have a conversation on the side as well. So with that, thank you. I'm going to hand it over to Chairman Roberts for our opening.
Yeah, sorry. I'll stand over here. Hakunmu Bosai.
You want me to say
Thoughts that you're thinking about.
Okay. Good morning. I'm going to stand up because I kind of like to make sure that if I have to say anything that you hear what I have to say. You may not agree with what I have to say or offer, and that's all right, as long as we contemplate it. And I would ask, can you hear me? And so Just to let you know, I'm a Quamee Indian from San Diego, California. I live on my ancestral land, which is the old Laguna Indian Reservation. It is now out of reservation status and in private property. I don't know that that was a good thing, but at the time that it happened, it was probably the best decision to be made. Times have changed, and they will continue to change. I will tell you that if you own private property and you don't pay your taxes, you'll find out in a hurry who owns your property. So, we're in different times in different places. I thank you for the opportunity to be here, Christina. Thank you for this. I'm feeling a little melancholy, to be honest with you. I don't find this place warm, and I've already given the state park rangers hell. And so I'm wearing the supervisor's shirt to help keep me warm. But again, I'm from Southern California, so the main ingredient here is the missing of the fire. I'm used to having a fire because it's part of our gathering, part of our traditional thing. A lot can be said about fire, and everybody's scared to death of them for good reason. We've burned up most of California in the last 10 years with it. But on the other hand, from our experience in San Diego, all the reservations have a fire department and don't mind bringing a fire truck along. So in the future gatherings, if we can do that, I think it would be appropriate and put us back to that understanding fire is a good energy. It's a cleansing energy. It gives warmth, and there is a good side to fire other than the damage that it brings. So I'm a believer in visualizing things. So if you all are cold, start visualizing a fire here and perhaps the sun will come up. So other than that, I would just say thank you for the opportunity to be here. And I pray to God that whatever it is that we're trying to do here for the state of California and the California Indians, that we find all the Indians who have been lost through this god-awful process of termination, losing your reservations, and the god-awful word of genocide. I've criticized folks for overusing that word primarily because I'm a product of the Second World War. So when you use that word, I'm visualizing the Jews in the gas chambers. I understand that genocide means getting rid of cultures, and there's certainly been 300 years or more of trying to get rid of the Native Americans across this country, and particularly here in California. So there are more Indians in California, and many that have been lost in that urban society. And for those that are of my age, I'm 87 come August, I really want you to write your story. I want you to write your biographies because I think you have something to say. I think that should be part of our archives in our library. I would like to see a library in the 4 different regions of the states, but all containing the same information in case we have an earthquake or fire. Everybody has access to that. But I'd like to see that information synthesized and let us Indians, for the first time, write our own history. And it doesn't have to be woe is me. I think we come from a very proud, strong generation. We're still here. Our people fought for that. And they lived off of roots and digging the dirt and being called diggers. So what? That's part of our environment, and we get our minerals from the earth. So there's no shame in that. And we have people today who are attorneys, who are political leaders, and so there's no end to what we can do. But I think our story and the truth of it needs to be told. So I won't go any longer. I hope that pretty well covers what it is that we're trying to do and how we're trying to do it. And thank you, Christina. And thank you for being here in civilian clothes.
Thank you, Councilmember Lucas. At this time, we'll have other council members introduce themselves and say a few words if they'd like. And I'm going to volunteer Councilmember Kessler-Mata to start.
Thanks, Christina. Thank you, Carmen Lucas, for those words. That was a wonderful way to open up the session today. I'm Kusla Kessler-Mata. I'm Chumash and Yokut from Pismo Beach area. Currently live in San Francisco, and I'm definitely paying my dues for being a teacher who cold calls people all the time. So thanks, Christina. I'm going to pass it off to Anthony, who is almost finished with his PhD in a couple of months.
Good morning, everybody. Oh, that sounds kind of weird. I'm Anthony Burris, and I am a member of, or citizen of Ion Band of Miwok Indians. And I am just really wrapped up in my PhD program right now, finishing up my dissertation. And I'm happy to be here with everybody, and I hope that we can all move forward in a good way and have progress for all our communities through this process. Where am I going?
Mishis Charwe, Inkatekaraka Isaac. Good morning. I'm Isaac Bohorkes. I'm a Loni Costanoan from Monterey County. Thank you for being here in person. It's good to see everybody, as everyone has said. Councilmember Lucas, thank you for those words. So true. It's just amazing. I was sharing earlier to see everyone smile and talk. And for those of you that are virtually, I know that you were here in spirit with us. So I'm just thankful that we have this meeting space this morning and look forward to the next couple of days and the dialogue. Thank you.
Good morning, everyone. I'm Joan Harper. I'm Pomo Coast Miwok from the Federated Indians of Great and Rancheria. I'm just happy to be here, and I'm very interested to hear what everyone has to say. Thank you.
Good morning. I'm Colleen Franco. Not Franco anymore. Sorry about that. I'm in West Sacramento, that's why. Anyway, I'm the chief of the Winnemem-Wintu tribe in Northern California. Our home watershed is the Mount Shasta McCloud River watershed that fills Shasta Dam and reaches all the way to San Diego with that water. So I'm here, and I'm glad to see a number of people have been able to come out. It's been a trying time for the COVID times, and still not over, but, they dropped all the mask things, and we're acting like it's all gone. So maybe it'll be a good thing, and maybe we are past it. Maybe it is on its way out. We pray for that kind of thing, so. I'm glad to be here, and I'm hoping that we can discuss some very important issues and to bring up some important topics for us to try to do something about. This is a first time for the state to address truth and healing, and we are not even sure how to do that. Where do you start with truth? And then how do you get that healing? And as we're talking about the fire, that's one way that we believe that we get healed is by that sacred fires. And so I'm in favor with that, a little warmer place, nice fire going, it would be good. So I'm anxious to talk to folks, and we'll see where it goes from here. Thank you.
I think if I stay seated, I'll be okay. Ayukui Naknau, Frankie Myers, Squinakoi. Thank you all for coming today and having this discussion. I look forward to creating an uncomfortable space. I think these are uncomfortable discussions we're having, and I think that's a good thing, because I think that's how we grow and how we move on. We'll do so in a safe space, but I think the discussion needs to be uncomfortable. We need to be uncomfortable about what we're talking about. And hope that good comes from it. And to the rest of the council, I hope this is the start to many uncomfortable conversations that lead us to growing stronger. Thank you.
Hello, it's me again. Yes, I think everybody's kind of had the same comments going around. The conversations that are going to happen over the next couple of days and moving into the future are not going to be easy. As Ms. Sis said, how do you heal? And how do those truths come out? I'm just excited and honored to be a part of this committee, this board, to try and help those discussions and get into those dialogues to try and find ways of how we do exactly that, how we heal, how we become a better people, how we work with each other. And so thank you all for being here again. And as I said, just truly honored.
Good morning, everybody. It's good to be here with all of you in person in 3D. I was thinking how everybody looks in two-dimensional form. As good as our technology has been on our devices, iPads or computer screens or phones, it's good to see everybody in 3D. I do associate myself with Carmen's remarks about the fire. I ran into you, Carmen, at the check-in line, and you said something about a fire, and I said, well, if anybody could get a fire going here, it would be you. So, and since that didn't happen, there's something wrong. So, but certainly for next time, which brings me to why I think my ancestors built these wind, I don't know what they're called. Windbreaks. Yeah, windbreaks. Ovals or circles open on two ends, but shielded mostly the wind, and you get inside there and there's no wind. So would like to be inside one of those right now too. And then I'm a little dismayed because your name was what? Laverne. Laverne said the opening prayer today, sat down and put on gloves, and when the local guy's putting gloves on, as much as a visualization I was engaged in to have a fire right there, it went when I saw the gloves. So, notwithstanding that, we're here. These are tough times, right? And I'm complaining as a modern Indian about the weather, and so here we are. But you know what? I agree with the remarks. Ready to engage in what we need to do to begin in earnest on the subject matter of truth and healing, and let's get this going. Let's do what we need to do. And I'm going to hand this off to who? Okay, and then I'll put on my mask, not because of COVID, but because of warmth.
Thank you. And we'll have an opportunity for folks that want to introduce themselves later as well. I'm now going to turn it over to Secretary Crowfoot for a few words.
Thanks so much. I'm visualizing that fire as I'm shaking here. Well, it's an honor to be here. I'm Wade Crowfoot, and I am our California Natural Resources Secretary, which means our agency includes state parks and CAL FIRE and Department of Fish and Wildlife and Water Resources, our conservancies, our Coastal Commission. And our mission is to steward California's natural, historic, and cultural resources. So I've been on a journey over the last 3 years in this position, and that is to listen and learn from tribal communities and tribal leaders who have been stewarding what we know as California's lands and waters from time immemorial. And I call it a journey because while we've made progress, we have a lot of work to do. It was almost 3 years ago under this incredible centennial oak tree that tribal leaders and Governor Newsom gathered together. And Governor Newsom, just about 6 months after taking office, did what no other California governor had done. And he issued a clear and direct and honest apology on behalf of the state of California for a history of discrimination, institutionalized racism, violence, and genocide. It was a moving day that I'll never forget, being in the audience, and he actually quoted verbatim California's first governor in the inaugural address, where that governor announced that he would pay Californians to kill Indian women and children. 170 years before that moment. And as I've been educated, acknowledging the darkness of California state government's treatment of indigenous inhabitants of these lands is the beginning of truth and healing. That was an important moment that was formalized in an executive order, which formalized that apology and established the Truth and Healing Council. So many thanks to the members of the Truth and Healing Council for what you have done and what you are doing right now. Incredibly important. We're obviously here at the future site of the California Indian Heritage Center because we are going to take that dark past and work to create a brighter future of partnership between state government and tribal governments and tribal communities. We are very excited on behalf of the Newsom administration to support the leadership of the task force made up of Native leaders who are building, or designing, and then ultimately building what this Heritage Center will look like. We are very hopeful it will be a place to study, to gather, to celebrate, and to really identify how we do build that brighter future. In our agency, but across state governments, we all are on this journey to identify how do we take the acknowledgement of the past and take action, meaningful, substantive action, to create new relationships between state government and tribal government. In our agency, that means making government-to-government consultation, which historically too often has been a check-the-box exercise for state and federal government, into consultations that happen early and often and meaningfully shape decision-making. It means integrating tribal priorities in our programs and our policies and our investments. And I'm really excited that we were able to bring on Geneva E.B. Thompson as our first Assistant Secretary for Tribal Affairs to institutionalize tribal priorities in this work. It means formalizing shared stewardship of our resources, formalizing co-management agreements to manage our lands and waters between state government agencies and tribal government agencies. And it means fulfilling the governor's tribal ancestral lands return policy to identify where we can actually take state-owned lands or lands owned by other entities and return them to the ownership and stewardship of California tribes. Some of this work, we've made progress in each of these areas that we're proud of, but we all recognize we have so much more work to do. So we come here to listen, to learn, to understand how we in state government can support the truth and healing that needs to be led by our Native leaders. And I'm just very thankful and also with an open mind and an open heart want to understand how we can continue to build the bridge to this brighter future.
Thank you, Secretary. Before I have the CIHC and the NAHC folks introduce themselves, does anybody have responses or reactions to what Secretary Crowfoot just said? Well, very well said. Thank you. I'm going to turn it over to those NAHC folks who are in attendance. And I saw you don't get away from me by sitting in the back row.
She knows me well. Thanks, Christina. Hi, everyone. Buffy McQuillan. I am newly appointed to the Native American Heritage Commission. I am a tribal citizen of the Round Valley Indian Tribes, also within that descendant of Nomalaki and Yuki heritage, and also grew up in the Ukiah Valley on the Yoke Rancheria. So that is a Pomo group of Mendocino County and neighbor to Christina's tribal nation, Dry Creek Rancheria. Happy to be here and definitely aware of the tough conversations and here to listen and get your perspectives as I do a lot of challenging work on the commission. But you know, I just want you all to know this is my honor to be here, be in this space, and looking forward to meeting many of you and taking this into my heart and soul. So I appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you. And then another one who sat in the last row. my friend and predecessor and member of the Indian Heritage Center Task Force. And this is not the time for your speech, but this is for your intro.
Larry Myers, and I'm retired, okay? But, yeah, I was previous executive secretary of the Native American Heritage Commission, and I've been involved with, I guess, the CPUC and the return of land to tribes, and we've been able to return like 4,000 acres to the Pitt River tribe, about 2,000 to 3,000 acres to a non-federally recognized Maidu consortium, and another 800 or so acres to the Potter Valley tribe. And it's really, I spent like 17 years working in that group for the ability to participate in that return of the land, because the way we had it set up, it was a consensus. If one disagreed, then nothing went through. And there were times when I was the only one disagreeing to ensure that the Pitt River tribe and the other Indian organizations received their due land. So, and I'm proud to be here, and I'm happy to hear, this truth and healing going on, because it's really important. I don't know how it's going to work out, but that's your job, it's not mine. So I wish you all the best. Thank you.
Thank you, Larry. And Chairman Roberts is also on that task force, but I think you're good, unless you want to say more. Great. And then we have some of our task force members are streaming in. And did I miss anybody? Okay. Then I'm going to hand it over to Director Quintero for some remarks.
Thank you, Christine. And it really is an incredible honor to be here with all of you today. I made some notes because there's some things that I do not want to skip. Really, it's my honor to be here. My name is Armando Quintero, and I'm the director of the Department of Parks and Recreation, which includes California State Parks. And there's 279 units in the California State Park system. And one of the things, for example, that we are committed to doing is, and we're already working with tribes on these consultations, and that's having a land acknowledgement of the first people at the entrance of every California State Park. And that's only a signal that just gives an indication of what people can start thinking about as we engage more deeply with tribes from around California. The California Indian Heritage Center really is an extraordinary opportunity to illuminate the stories, the presence, and the importance of the indigenous cultures of California, who have called these lands home for hundreds of generations. When I first started in this role, I had a number of folks that I work with come up to me and say, I'm third generation Californian, I'm second generation Californian, and some even could claim 7 generations. And I really thank them for that, because what it made me think is what I just said. There are people here who've been here for hundreds of generations, and we really need to celebrate that. The California Indian Heritage Center will be a place of honor, memory, history, engagement, and the future of indigenous cultures and the languages that are foundational to what we now call California. California State Parks continues to work closely with tribes to promote successful cooperation and partnership in preservation, management, and interpretation of cultural and natural resources throughout the California State Park system. And last fall, we saw many strides in our efforts of partnership with indigenous tribes, and I'd like to mention a few of those. I had the honor of signing an MOU with the Amamutsan Tribal Band and Land Trust to strengthen our partnership and restore the application of traditional ecological knowledge within the Santa Cruz District of State Parks, including the Korosti Valley. I got to visit that site with elders of the community, and really it was a day that felt like we somehow revealed a spirituality of connection to the world in signing that MOU. The California State Park Commission, Recreation Commission, restored the name for Sume State Park in the north to honor the place name that has been used by the Yokut people or Yurok people for countless generations. Forgive me. There is a new park in San Diego, and it is called Ipai Tipai Kumeai I Motni Hepok. and that means the land of the first people. And it's an exhibit area, and it opened next to Old Town in San Diego. And this park showcases the Kumeyaay culture and their connections to the San Diego River and the region south all the way into northern Mexico. And one of the things that is incredible about that park, and I think sets the kind of model and example that we need to be thinking about, is that when you go to that park, just like I said, the name of the park, all the signage in the park is first written in Kumeyaay, then it's in Spanish, and then in English, including tiles along the paths that have these beautiful representations of native species. And again, their first name you see is the Kumeyaay word for those organisms. It's really an extraordinary and beautiful place, and I think a kind of model that we need to be thinking about as we work with tribes throughout California. Parks leadership and interpretive staff from Sutter's Fort State Historic Park are consulting with local tribes to develop an interpretation master plan and hopefully an agreement that allows continual growth in our understanding not only of the past but of the present and the future. And a few of us gathered yesterday at Sutter's Fort with Superintendent and participants in the program, including Anthony. And I was really struck by the sort of ideas that I saw break loose in my own mind about how I view the world in just those short conversations that happened yesterday, and had some wonderful conversations with folks from within parks and within several tribes that were represented there, including Anthony and people from the Kashaya Pomo group. And I was, not that I needed to be reminded, but in the 1980s I worked with 3 elders from the Kashaya Pomo band at Point Reyes National Seashore, and they taught me more than I can ever be completely thankful for. And I was able to participate in ceremonies that were both private and public, and celebrations. And when I think about that, I think about what our partnership in California with state parks can do to the world and for cultures, in revealing the full breadth or fuller breadth of culture that also allows communities to claim these places again and publicly. So I'm really thrilled about this continuing partnership. The California State Parks NAGPRA program is working diligently to comply with updated NAGPRA laws. The first time that I spoke with our Deputy Director for Cultural Resources, I asked about ancestral remains and funerary items and cultural belongings that really need to be returned to their homelands. And the answer left me speechless, honestly. And I want to acknowledge that Leslie, with her team, is hiring a group of Native people from around the state to help get all of those remains and artifacts back to their homes where they belong. And I very much look forward to that. Without the contributions of California Native American people, we cannot tell the full human story of California or understand how we can right the wrongs. And it's something that we look forward to doing with you. Re-examining our past is a major initiative of state parks, and along with the Natural Resources Agency and the Department of Transportation, we are working quickly to identify and redress discriminatory names of features attached to state park and transportation systems, and that's already well underway. There's a strong partnership between the Tribes of California Indigenous Communities and California State Parks in bringing forward the histories, the cultures, the languages of generations of people for, as I said earlier, for whom this state, or what we call this state now, has been home for well over 10,000 years. We now know that humans traveled in this part of the world and in the West almost 26,000 years ago already. And so as we sit here today and we were talking about fire and being warmth, I commented to the chairwoman that maybe we all have to stoke the fires in our own chests while we're here. And but I do think about sort of the knowledge that's beneath our feet. There's a term for fungi called mycelium. This is this huge, incredible network of connection. And I think that our job together with all of you is to reinvigorate that mycelium, to create connection, and exchange of information and nutrients and understanding and cooperation. It's an extraordinary opportunity. So it's an honor, an extraordinary honor, to move into the future in partnership with you, with your communities, and all of the descendants of the first people of California. Thank you.
Thank you, Director. Very well said. Again, are there any thoughts or reactions at this time that anyone has?
Thank you, Christina. My name is Ron Montez. I'm an elder from the Big Valley Band of Pomo Indians in Lakeport. And my father is Wintun from Calusa, the old res. I laid him to rest there. That was his last wish, to be buried there. And I have, my mother is from the Hopper tribe or clan from Big Valley. And our ancestors' names that came down are the Fred family. In that they had 5 brothers and 5 sisters. And they all had quite a few kids. I'm one of them. There was a time when we were living quite well, not knowing that we were poor, and that we had some time to reflect on our place where we lived. We lived right next to the lake. And so when termination came, it moved me from that position into Los Angeles, of all places, in a home, a project where I was surrounded by people that different colors and nationalities, and removed from my homeland. When we came back to our home, we found out that we didn't own that land. We didn't have that land anymore. It was lost because of not paying taxes, being duped out of it for a loan for a car. And so my generation, I'm 72, will be 73 in a few months, we have no land. My brothers and sisters, we have nothing. I was involved in the takeover of a listening center in the Windsor area, and it is now called Yake'ama, which means our land. Our purpose was to have lands available to any native in California who has no place to live. You have a place. You can go there and live there. I have a place. But my family, in our place where we grew up, we have nothing. And so there's a lot of wrongs that need to be righted. And I really truly believe that what Governor Newsom's began was the first step to acknowledge what had happened. The second step needs to take place. The second step is they acknowledge the ground and the elders and those people of that land, and they ask them for forgiveness. And then the elders, in their asking for forgiveness, they bring a gift, a token, recognizing who they are. And once the elders receive that, that's the beginning where we can go. And if we don't do that, we're going to have a lot of ideas, but we need to have that part for us to take the next step. So thank you for the time.
Thank you. Thank you for sharing. Are there any other thoughts or reactions at this time?
I didn't think I was going to say anything today, but my name's Michelle Lapina. I'm a member of the Pit River Tribe. I'm also Cabazon from Southern California. And I've been living in Sacramento for 23 years since I graduated from law school at UC Davis. And, you know, living in Sacramento, you see you see the history being missed. And, you know, driving by Sutter's Ford on my way to work every day is it's hard. And, you know, the curriculum and the mission project, you know, there's so much burden that we carry. And my grandparents, they lived up in Truckee, and, you know, it's near Squaw Valley, what they called Squaw Valley. And that always disturbed me so much. And coming to Sacramento 23 years ago, there was so much to do. There was so much work to do. And, you know, there was gaming and compacts and getting economies started and rejuvenating our cultures. But there was all of that going on within tribal communities. But within the state, there was nothing really progressing. And it was really overwhelming as a Native person to see all that needed to be done with the names and the parks and the ancestors in storage. And it really feels good to hear what you've been saying on this from the state folks, that I don't have to worry as much anymore. And I'm feeling like some of the burden, you're lifting it off from me. Like I don't have to worry about all of the parks not representing Native people, and I don't have to worry about being ignored and the Native people being forgotten. And so thank you. Thank you, Christina, for starting this. And you know, I definitely want to thank the governor for beginning this process here a few years ago. And that was a tremendously inspirational, emotional moment for me. But I do have 3 grown children. My youngest just turned 18 yesterday, and I feel like they're going to have it a lot better than me. And that's a wonderful, wonderful gift. So I'll take these, you know, words and this experience to them, because they're all doing great, and they will be working in the Indian community and doing their part. And we all here are doing our part, but now I don't have to do as much and worry about as much. So thank you. But there's still more to do.
Thank you, Michelle. Are there any other thoughts or reactions at this time? And it can be anyone. It doesn't have to just be California Native people. Okay. Then I'm going to hand it over to my friend Larry to give us a quick update on what's going on here and next steps here before we take a brief break and talk a little bit about some of the bad things.
I think I'll just let me stand up here in the center here. I want to welcome everyone, and I want to kind of reframe what we're talking about. I don't want to talk the future of the Heritage Center. This is now. You know, this is how when we start making this the place where we want to come, where we want to enjoy ourselves. And as Ron talked about, being terminated and lost his place. Well, we want this to be a place for all Indians to be able to come here and be happy, be relaxed, gather, meet other Indians, have their family, and just enjoy being here. So that's kind of the whole future, this whole thing. And you know, the current State Indian Museum was built to house the Hathaway collections, and it was not built with involvement of Indian people at all. It was just built for another separate purpose. But what had happened in the 40s, I think William Fuller, Bertha Stewart, Marie Potts, and a few other very important ladies really got together and formed the Federation of California Indians. And they started advocating for the rights of California Indian people as it related to some legislation that was going through. Well, they had to meet somewhere in the Sacramento area because the Capitol was here, the Attorney General's office was here, and the Bureau of Indian Affairs was here. And it just so happened that they congregated around the California State Indian Museum. And it sort of became a place, a gathering place. as their membership grew, they would meet in the area and they would have fundraisers and do what needed to be done. And it became a place where Indian people wanted to gather. Then Honored Elders developed, and the Acorn Festival developed, and it just grew. And I think as we feel when we go there, we just feel relaxed, and you know, people are selling their items and their merchandise, and there's food, and it's just a fun place to be during those times. That's kind of the idea that we want this place to develop into. It doesn't matter if we have a fantastic facility over there. It can be just maybe, and it won't be one shed kind of place, but the whole thing is going to be a spirit, of place. And the only way we can do that is start using it, to start participating, and to bring the community, the entire community over here. Where we are right now is we've really narrowed the field of architectural firms that are going to start developing plans, and we're not ready yet to publicize who it is, but that'll be fairly soon, because we're really moving along now. And I think within 4 or 5 years, 6 years, you'll be seeing some construction activity going on out here. And I think, you know, we've got to keep in mind that, you know, we've got to keep moving it forward. We put this thing together to have a partnership with the Department of Parks and Recreation and the Indian community. And how that's going to work is when the governance is developed, the governance structure. And the whole idea is to have parks provide the maintenance, provide the security. And Indian people will take control of the cultural resources, will interpret how they wish to interpret. And it'll be their responsibility to reach out to all the Indians in California and bring them all in and see what needs to be done, how they want to do it. It will not be the responsibility of the parks. It'll be our responsibility. And I think that's what's going to really make this facility a lot different than the others that are out there, because there's a lot of museums. There's a lot of other places. And this will not be a museum. It'll be a heritage center. And, you know, the grand ideas that float through my mind is that it will be able to electronically contact, work with all the UC systems, the state colleges, the community college, the Indian museums that exist in the state of California and other locations electronically. So you can share information, you can share data, you can do a lot of things that you can't do now. And, you know, that's the grand thing. Whatever happens down the road, I don't know. But anyway, I just wanted to bring you up to date. It's been a long time. It's been 30 or 40 years in the entire process. A lot of people have worked on this thing before I got started. I think I've been involved in it since the 1990s, in and out, and trying to keep it forward, keeping it moving along, not letting people forget what we're trying to do here. And, you know, like I said, a lot of people had this dream before me, and they have gone, and we've got to continue to let it, to keep building and keep forcing it and keep it on the burner, so that you know, it becomes a reality, and it becomes a reality not only for us but for our children in the future. So it's, you know, it's something that I think we can all be proud of in the end. So I want to thank you again for coming here, and thank you for participating, and keep aware of this thing. You know, keep asking questions, keep finding out what's going on, because that's the only way it's going to really keep moving along. We won't let people forget. So anyway, all righty. Have a good day. And, you know, you get up here, you get the mic, you get warmer. You forget about how cold it is. Thank you, Christina.
Thank you, Larry. That's because you're in the middle of the fire pit. So at this time, are there any thoughts before we take a quick break for folks to kind of stretch and move around, and then we'll get into some of the original legislation that we're going to be talking about today? Okay, no reactions. So we're going to take about a 10-minute break and come back here at around 10:45 for our discussion.
Things, you'll notice the sun's coming out. It's beginning to warm a little bit, so don't ever give up on those things. They're real. Thank you.
Thank you, council member. I'm going to set the microphone down while I grab my notes, and if folks could come back into the circle. And if folks are comfortable coming closer, that would be okay, but also I can move the mic around as well.
Throw your jacket off?
Okay. Is it easier if I stand for everybody, or is it okay if I sit? I'll stand. Or sit? Kathleen, thumbs up, thumbs down? Do both at the same time. Okay. It's just like my job every day. So we're going to get into some of the more serious pieces of this discussion. And I'm going to read some excerpts from some primary source materials that you'll be able to view this afternoon if you go to this California State Library's reading room. But really, we're trying to create a baseline of how people were legislating, what people felt comfortable saying out loud in public that had popular buy-in. And so I'm going to read to lay the context for the conversations taking place today. And you don't need to respond or react to what I'm reading, but it is something to think about because this is, straight from our California legislature, our first governor. And it may be difficult to hear, so please feel free to step away if needed. In 1847, prior to the formation of the state, the California Star reported that some Californians, I'm told, have been at their old game, committing horrid outrages on the defenseless Indians, killing, taking prisoners, and making slaves of them. I forbear mentioning names. The sub-Indian agent has sent his report to our worthy governor, and there is no doubt but he will handle the wretches without gloves. The first governor of the American state of California, in his 1851 State of the State address, stated that a war of extermination will continue to be waged between the races until the Indian race becomes extinct, must be expected. While we cannot anticipate this result, but with painful regret, the inevitable destiny of the race is beyond the power or wisdom of man to avert. In the first session of the state legislature, an act for the government and protection of Indians was passed, which read, among other provisions, that justices of the peace shall have jurisdiction in all cases of complaints by, for, or against Indians in their respective townships in this state. The white person or proprietor in possession of such lands may apply to a justice of the peace in the township where the Indians reside to set off such Indians a certain amount of land. So basically all of the things that Native people had now had the jurisdiction of white people in those places. In no case shall a white man be convicted of any offense upon the testimony of an Indian or Indians. An Indian convicted of stealing horses, mules, cattle, or any valuable thing shall be subject to receive any number of lashes not exceeding 25. Later in the same session, the first state legislature passed a statute stating that no black, mulatto person, or Indian shall be permitted to give evidence in any action to which a white person is a party in any court of this state. Several other laws followed over the next several years that were just like that. Throughout these early years, the legislature passed several statutes authorizing the governor to call out troops to defend the frontier and providing for their pay and compensation for the Indian Wars. They continued to authorize state expenditures for the murder of Indian people in their own homelands. In 1854, the state then effectively made it illegal for Indian people to obtain firearms, stating any person or persons who shall sell or give or in any way dispose of to any Indian or Indians of either sex in this state any firearms or ammunition of any description shall be deemed guilty of a misdemeanor. In 1856, the legislature urged upon Congress the necessity of immediate action to provide some means for the extinguishment of Indian titles to lands in this state. In 1860, the legislature instructed and requested Congress to urge upon the federal authorities to cede the state of California the entire jurisdiction over Indians and Indian affairs within our borders. In 1862, the legislature demanded the removal of all undomesticated Indians from the white settlements to distant reservations. Also in 1862, the legislature allowed that the city of Sacramento is hereby accepted from the operation of so much of the general school law as prohibits Indians from attending the common schools, provided such Indian child is in the care, custody, and control of white persons residing in the city. In 1863, the legislature recommended that Indians, as fast as they can be gathered by the military or otherwise, should be removed and there colonized, the government having exclusive jurisdiction over said reservation. In 1877 to 1878, the legislature requested that Congress transfer the management of Indian affairs from the Department of Interior to the Department of War, and later asked that the government provide a suitable reservation for these Indians apart from the whites, and removed them thereto as soon as practicable. During these years, 18 negotiated treaties reserving 8.5 million acres for California tribes were repudiated by Congress and went unratified at the urging of the California legislature and business interests. Signatory tribes' lands were taken by Californians as Native people left for reservations that were never established, leaving many Native peoples completely homeless upon returning to their ancestral homes. And throughout these early years, the state funded the forcible and often violent removal of California Native people from their homelands. Many Native people died on these journeys to reservations, where they were forced to survive alongside often unrelated tribes and sometimes located in other states. I'm mentioning all of this because, from its inception, the state has not been an inclusive place to live and thrive. It has, from its beginnings, sought to exclude the people who came before, and to rewrite history in a way that has resulted in the ultimate act of genocide by rendering invisible an entire population of people who are still here, effectively negating our existence through intentional, calculated, and collective ignorance. Now, as I mentioned earlier, we'd like you to reflect on the importance of reframing this narrative to include the lived experience of California Native peoples, our ancestors, each other, and our children, the strength of our collective communities, and why it's important that we remember and honor what our ancestors and our people have experienced, especially during times like these, where invisibility is no longer the best tool for survival of our people. For the California Native participants in attendance, what is it that you hope that we collectively remember about our ancestors, each other, and the values of our people that will guide this work? You can also share memories or thoughts as they occur. For the non-Native participants in attendance, what is it that you hope you can contribute to this work as an ally or otherwise to be responsive to the loss California Native people have experienced that the state is responsible for? You can also engage by sharing reactions to the history, the concept of shared accountability, and other thoughts as they occur. Or if you have thoughts or reflections inspired by what you've already heard today, please feel free to share those thoughts. If we veer too off course in this discussion, or if your or someone else's comments are causing upsetting feelings, I may ask you to please pause to process your thoughts and reframe your comments so that we're not causing each other additional trauma. And again, please feel free to step away as needed. So I'm going to ask if anyone has thoughts or reactions at this time. Either from the California Native participants or the non-Native participants. And if you're streaming, we can also take your comments as well. I'm going to go this way.
I feel the long pause for anyone to come forward and speak from their heart is just a mere shadow of the pain and the struggle and the journey. I'm not an American citizen. I love this land and appreciate the heritage, the history, and I pray for the healing to begin. Recognition of who the true bearers of the land are, the creator of the land. And I thank you. Please share your feelings. We need to heal. Thank you.
Thank you.
Ayukui, Nakna, Virginia Hedrick, Shragon Mechek, Nakpulagla. Good morning, my name is Virginia Hedrick. I'm a member of the Yurok Tribe and the Executive Director for the California Consortium for Urban Indian Health. Thank you, Christina, for the mic. Just yesterday, a friend who's a member of Cherokee Nation recently moved here to Sacramento from the Bay Area. And we have kids almost the exact same age. I have 5 kids from 5 to 21. And she said her 4th grader got a project assignment, and she sent me a picture of it, and it was to create a diorama of a California tribe and some of the outlines. And she said, I'm thinking about doing a tribal council room or an Indian health clinic. What do you think? And I loved it. I was like, oh, that's so great. She's like, it's so important. We both recognize this moment, like the opportunity to educate a 4th grade class about California Indians. You want to see a California tribe? I could build you a roundhouse. I could build you a semi-subterranean Yurok house. I could build a lot of houses, but I also want you to see us here and now, in today's current world. And some of this education and healing is about that. And I think that's what could be really transformative about the center is showing past, present, and future and where we're going. My partner Calvin also spoke at that time, and he's like, yeah, one time a teacher asked me, can you send me a picture of a Native American in a house? And he was like, done. What do you want to know about the house? Square footage? And that's so important, you know, and I'm kind of making light because those are really incredibly heavy pieces that we shared. And I have a lot of reactions to those that today is not a good day to process those. So I just wanted to share a couple of those things. And I work specifically in healthcare, so I can't pass the mic without talking about sort of the deep impacts we have still seeing the effects of that trauma to the Indigenous people of California and the responsibility that the state of California has to restorative healthcare, both in a Western sense and like providing direct support through restoration of the state Indian health program to our Indian health programs, but also an acknowledgement of traditional healers and natural helpers and being a part of that healing process and allowing those providers to be billable, instituted within our Indian health program network, not just within substance use delivery, but within Indian healthcare delivery, because alongside of those things, we lost access to our traditional gathering, those traditional healing sites, those healers, and you know, many of us in these last few generations have been working to restore those healing practices, and it is a healing practice at the community level and at the individual level. My brother and I, we get away with it sometimes because we have different last names now, but usually a side-by-side will tip that we're siblings. We were the first in our family in a few generations to honor a naming practice with our babies, of waiting 10 days to name them. My babies were born off of our homelands. I live and work here in Sacramento and have for about 15 years. So I went to Kaiser and said, hey, I don't want to name my baby for 10 days. And I was fortunate that I met the right person at the right time who said, okay, come at 5 a.m., file your paperwork on the 10th day, and I'll walk it across the county myself. I've never had this happen, but I'll do that for you. And 2 years later, when I had my next baby, same person, and we did it. But not every California Indian has that opportunity to acknowledge those practices. And so we have babies that are named Baby Myers, Baby Girl, and because we're trying to honor those practices that in many ways have become illegal or outlawed, to do those very simple things. And so I just want to offer those pieces of healing, of restoration processes. And you said something earlier today that I thought was really beautiful. Where things have changed and they're going to continue to change. And that's sort of like leaning into that, continuing to change, and how do we acknowledge and how do we be who we need to be in 2022 with a recognition and honoring of those who came before us. Waka.
That was beautiful. Thank you. Councilmember Sisk.
Yeah, that we share that history up and down the state. And I'm so far in the north that our tribe didn't really get the mission system impacted on us either. But, knowing that history really doesn't help us today in the struggles that we have right now. Like you were saying about, our traditions that have not been put to sleep, have not been forgotten, are still being a struggle for us in gaining access to Forest Service land to hold our ceremonies, and they're supposed to be managing it for us, right? But because we're not a federally recognized tribe, they say they can't use the Farm Bill, they can't close the area to anybody else coming in, and so we're subjected to anybody who wants to come by. And we have documented what they do when they come by. We live in the North State where white supremacy is pretty strong, and apparently they are trying to buy out the supervisor positions, and so there's little hope that things are going to change for tribal people in that area. But we have to think about that history that we came from, and that trauma that our grandparents and parents lived through to get to this point. And now, we were all Indians at that time, and we were all pretty much thought of in that way. But today, we're separated. Some of you are federally recognized, some of you are now disenrolled, some of you are terminated, and some of us are just invisible. And that is the problem that I have, is like, why would we sit back and let that be? Why don't we correct that? Us, the tribal people first, to correct that and stop referring, allowing those labels, because I don't think you understand what it feels like or what it means to be unrecognized. At the UN, they call them unrepresented peoples in the world. That means nobody stands up for you. Nobody knows you exist. Nobody provides any kind of funding. There are no COVID funds that come down to protect our people in the ways that, we borrow from HUPA test packets. They take care of us as our sister tribe, but we don't get any ourselves. In fact, they even give us commodities because we don't qualify for the commods. That's how bad it is for the unrecognized people in the state. And us Indian people, really need to correct that and start changing so that, one thing is the federal government and the other thing is the state. This state should have a list of recognized tribes by the state. Or, get rid of that state map of tribes. If you're not going to recognize the tribes on that map, then change it. Give us back our stuff from the museums if we're not Indians. If we're not those tribes. And that's, I think we need to start kind of thinking through what can we do to make things more equal and more doable. Because when I hear Crowfoot talking about doing stuff for the tribes, and I'm thinking, wonder who the tribes are, because we're not usually one of them. And there are many tribes in the state who feel that same way, and many people who feel that same way about whether or not we're actually going to benefit from being on this council and bringing up the truths of that, when there are so many inequities that have been created in the 80s. That problem in the 1850s and 60s now replicated in the 1980s, when they established the list and they gave money to certain people, and they did, they took away status, but also denied other people by termination. And now we need to address that and work our way back to what that should be. Work our way back. It's like, how do we get unrecognized children health care and education benefits and the ability to go to college? They don't have that right now. And when we sent our student to college, he got to Sacramento, and the Indian Club was introducing their tribal members, and people from Yocha Dihe, it's like, oh yeah, we got a car and we got a scholarship and they're paying for all my education, and on down. And when I got to the Winnemem, because I got this new shirt and I got $20 in my pocket, and my uncle lives down here, so I'm going to try to make it. But there's no general way of dealing with the inequities, but we're losing the California flavor of tribal presence. That's our job. How do we keep that? We don't keep that, if we don't grow villages, if we don't make tribal memberships more than a tribal card. Tribal carrying card people are a dime a dozen, and they don't add to California future histories. They're benefiting, but they're not really. They shouldn't be. Some of the real people who should be benefiting are not. And so that's what we need to fix. And that stems from the governor here. And how do we make this truth and healing permanent? If this governor is no longer governor, what happens to this effort of truth and healing? Is there a way, a law, or something that would make the Truth and Healing Council, because it's going to take years for this to actually experience, how can we do this? And it's going to be a number of people who try to figure it out, But, just like we were worried during the recall, whether or not this council would continue if there were a new governor. I mean, that's always going to be the issue when his term is up. But in the meantime, can we, look at how do we preserve this council so that it can have the time it needs to work through the 135 dialects of California's tribal languages here, So thank you.
Thank you, council member.
It took me a minute to process what you had read there, because it is, for me, and I think for a lot of folks, it's hard to listen to, right? It is really hard to listen to, and I try to auto tune it out for a minute, right? When you hear stuff, you just kind of not listen to it. I thought, no, I should probably listen, let this sink in, and say something. And I think one of the things that I try to remind myself as we move forward, that's not who we were. That's what happened to us. As Yurok, we know it through our history, through our teachings. We've gone through hard times before white people ever were here. We've gone through times of starvation, no food, no salmon, no acorns, the great suffering. We've had 3 of them. We've come through hard times. We've come to the other side. We've come through this one as well. And I think about the amount of money that was spent, the amount of resources that were spent to make sure that this group never happened, to make sure that we never sat here, the amount of resources that were poured in to take our land from us, to kill us, to fund the genocide. That's an incredible amount of money, and we're still here. And then I think, for whatever reason, I get into the nuts and bolts of how that happened, right? So there was a piece of legislation that was brought before California that was passed. Someone had to type it up, right? Someone had to write it down and take notes. Someone had to hand that in. It paid for ammunition and guns to fight and to kill us. Someone had to issue that paycheck. Someone had to purposely find the invoice and send it in so that those guns could be ordered. Someone had to deliver those guns. Someone had to drive them to where they were going. Someone had to store them. Good people did this. Good, God-fearing people did this, right? This wasn't a group of evil, terrible, horrific people that were all hell-bent on killing Indians. Sure, there were some of them, but there was a whole lot more good people willing to go along, willing to do their job, willing to fulfill their mandate. And I say that because there's good people now. There's good people now that are just doing their job that perpetuate those systems. The same good people 100 years ago that processed the checks to buy the guns to kill us. Those positions still exist. Those systems still exist today. It's hard because I look out at where we're sitting here and I look at all these uniforms around us. The systems exist, right? They exist today. Some are more clear than others. Today it's clear those systems exist. It wasn't long ago when we'd go out to our state park to gather that these suits here is what we'd watch out for. Because they're not good. These aren't symbols of safety for me. They're symbols of oppression. And the more that I'm surrounded by it, the more uncomfortable I am. I know I'm not the only one either. But they're good people trying to do a job. I think as we have these discussions about truth and healing, we can't allow the thought of being a good person. We can't allow ourselves to give passes to good people. Have to have accountability across the entire system. I think it's critical that we hold people accountable. I think we have to, as a council, we have to hold ourselves accountable. We have to hold systems accountable. And we have to hold good people accountable. I think that's how we heal, and I think people have to recognize that. There was words said today in the opening remarks. I was talking to my sister about it at break there. Good intentions. Felt like they come from a good place. But they're hurtful. They're not right. They didn't recognize us as being here since time immemorial. We gave him a pass. Talking about sister, we gave him a pass. We're in a good place. We're talking here, and we're all saying good things. We like to hear. We'll give that person a pass, right? Probably shouldn't have, right? Probably shouldn't have given him a pass. This is the place to have uncomfortable conversations. I said that earlier because I believe that. We got to have these uncomfortable conversations, and it's not about calling someone out, right? This isn't about putting one individual on blast. It's like having a conversation about systems that were designed to kill us, that exist today, and we use the cover of being good to let it be okay.
Frankie, I think I know what you were talking about there at the end. Because I was thinking, what, should I bring this up or not? Our people have been here a long time. You used the term time immemorial. In the case of my people, our tribe, and not just Pechanga, all our sister bands, our take on the world actually begins with where we believe the world was created, which is at a place called Echva, Temecula. It's in the Temecula Valley. We don't believe we came over on the Bering Strait. We didn't migrate down from the Great Basin into California in some so-called fantasy theory called Shoshonian wedge. We believe that our people were created from the beginning in Southern California. So when I, for instance, heard the thing about, I don't know how it was expressed in terms of generations, hundreds of generations, I'm not all that good at math, so I was trying to think, okay, well, generation is 20 years, and 5 generations, 100 years, and so hundreds of generations might be a few thousand years. Here's what I know. Let me start here. When I was a student of bird songs, of Robert Levi from Torres Martinez, we'd chat about things all the time. Like, he'd say, you know what? He says, you know, we have these songs with these words in them, and sometimes we know what they are, and sometimes we don't. He says, but I'll tell you one thing. He says, if we have a word for something, well, then we needed to have a word for it. We didn't have words for things we didn't need. And he says, so if we have a name for something, well, we needed it at some time, even if that thing is no longer here. And certain birds have, gone extinct and stuff like that, animals. And so I learned that from him. I was pretty young. I was in my young 20s, I think. So 10 years ago. And so, I don't know, probably a decade later, before I was ever on a tribal council, I was on our tribe's cultural resources committee, and we were in a debate with a housing project right next to us. And today it's fully built out. I think it's between 7,000 and 10,000 homes. What we didn't know then, by the way, was that we were so late in the CEQA process for that project. It was pathetic. We were responding to a draft environmental impact report, but the die was already cast a decade and a half earlier when there was a county general plan that we didn't know, and that project was part of the general plan. So it was already kind of conceived and it was simply manifesting in front of us. But the village that our people were evicted from was in the middle of that housing tract. And that's why we were up in angst, having learned about it in the late 1980s. And so we were having an argument with, our committee was having an argument with the contract archaeologist for the project, whose name I remember, but I will leave out for this moment. But he came out of UC Riverside, and he was an adherent of the godfather of archaeology out of UCLA at the time, and whose imprint is still in the UC system, by the way, and I think in archaeology throughout the U.S. in terms of modern Indians versus prehistoric Indians, and to use some of their terminology. And they advocate for retention of ancestral remains into perpetuity. But anyway, that's a digression. The point here is how old our site was that our village that we were evicted from, and he said, well, he was a Shoshone and Wedge adherent, and he said, well, if you're claiming this site, you can't possibly be, the site can't possibly be that old because you haven't been here, your people haven't been here that long. And I said, well, you don't know what you're talking about, Mr. Archaeologist, Mr. Contract Archaeologist. And he said, no, he says, your people, your whole tribe, and your neighboring tribes, you Uto-Aztecan people, migrated out of the Great Basin into Southern California, and you pushed the Kumeyaay to the south as you went to the coast, and you pushed the Hokan-speaking people to the north, the Chumash, and they simply parted the ways and said, come on in, I guess, and which is totally unreal. But that was his take, and I said, well, okay, so the timeline for your story is what? 1,200, 1,500 years, right? And he said, yes, and that's how long you've been here, therefore your site can't be older than that. I said, well, guess what? We, in our songs, in our stories, we have a word for something called the bison. And I told him the word. It's in our songs. We sing the songs today. They're part of our funeral customs, so we still sing them at our wakes. And the word is the word for the Pleistocene bison, is what it is. And it's right there. It's in our songs. It's paired with the word for bear. And the way our songs go is we name things, and they're named in pairs, and so these two entities are named in our songs like that. And I said, so we're naming this bison in our songs. I said, and we both know there haven't been bison in the region here, or in the historic record, the written record, since there was a written record in our region, which I take back to 1769, when Father Sarah came into Southern California. And he said, well, the reason for that is it's a memory culture word. Your people remembered this when you were up in the Great Basin and have carried this around as a memory word, and even though you don't have it anymore. And I said what I started off with, we don't have words for things we didn't have. We have words for things we had and knew. The lesson that I was taught. And we argued, and he wasn't coming to our side, and I certainly wasn't going over to his side. So ended there at loggerheads. And he was all about the salvage excavation of the site anyway. So there's homes on that site now today, a whole neighborhood. But what happened about 3 years later is, we're in Temecula, right? The city right next to Temecula is Murrieta. So about 5-6 miles away, as development in our valley was really exploding during this time, there were these hills that were being excavated. Today there's a Target there, there's a movie theater there, and actually a high school, Murrieta Mesa. But as they were excavating, the paleontologists were doing their work and exploration, and at somewhere between 20 and 25 feet, they found the remains of these bison in the ground. And all the scientists were very excited about this discovery, because 5 to 6 miles away from our office, where I had that argument with contract archaeologist person from UC Riverside, there they were. And then about a year or two later, Metropolitan Water District began the excavation for the Diamond Valley Reservoir in the mid-1990s. 7 saddle dams in the valley north of us, about 10 miles. And today the Diamond Valley Reservoir is there. And in the process of excavating for that, they found countless Pleistocene bison and mastodons and all those ice age animals. And so that's my point. I don't know how hundreds of generations, I don't know how far back that goes, but I do know that the ice age is 10,000 to 1.8 million years ago. And so that's a time horizon for this animal that's in our songs, the Pleistocene bison. So we've been here a long time, longer than the Bering Strait. We didn't come from the Great Basin. That we fought a company out of Watsonville who wanted to build a mine right across the street from us, basically, Pulaski Mountain, and that mountain was sacred because that's where the very first funeral happened in human life, according to our religion and our beliefs, and that's where that happened. So we talk about things in ancient terms, and so for so long since that time period, we had all this existence as a people, and then in the last 250 years, really the blink of an eye, things have changed. So much of what's been said here today is very dramatic, and it is hard to hear. What Christina read this morning here, especially what Indian people can't do. You can't convict somebody on the basis of testimony of an Indian, right? And on and on and on. I remember coming across that about 30 years ago for the first time too. As hard as it was to read for the first time then, it's still hard to hear. And I've heard it before. I knew exactly as soon as you started in on it. I'm like, okay, here we go. I've heard this, I've read it, and it's still hard to hear. And so there's a lot of work to be done. Listening to the school project of the fourth graders, I really do appreciate the perspective that you expressed in that, because so many people for so long have done so much to try to make us disappear as Indian people and as Indian tribes. We're not supposed to be here. Us California Indians, we, in spite of everybody's best efforts, we still are here, okay? And I guess from one perspective, there's quite a mess here, right? And that's what we're trying to deal with. But from another perspective, Indian in a house selfie, that's awesome, right? Because we're here and we're moving forward. We're resourceful. We're persistent. We've persevered. We'll continue to do this. Being a tribe that has been fortunate to be involved in gaming, we've had lots of naysayers in our valley, whose attitudes, as friendly as they might sound, we know the attitudes right beneath the veneer are on the hostile side. And when we were getting started, we had a lot of hostility aimed at us, and I know some of that's still there too. But I would tell them, folks, you don't have to live here. In fact, I know in 10 or 20 years, you'll probably be somewhere else. You'll move. Real estate values, you think, will go up or down, and you'll move accordingly. We won't move. We can't move. This is our land. This is where we're from. We will always be here. So if you want to be here and live with us in this valley, fine. If you don't want to be here, you can go somewhere else. We're not going to do that. We can't do that. And we won't do it. So that's kind of our take on things. So in spite of all these things that have brought us to this point, it's pretty stark sometimes to hear these things and realize we're not supposed to be here. But here we are. And we have kids. We have grandkids. We've had the next generation in front of us unfolding. And so we owe it to them to fix things, make things right, and move forward in the best way that we can as Indian people. And, because we've been left this responsibility. I mean, we're not just here. We're not just existing and breathing. I think we're here for a purpose, and those of us that are here on this council, for example, the happenstance or the purposefulness that we're on this. I think we're here for a reason in this combination of people to try to get this work done, or at least to get it started. I hope it gets done, and I hope we're part of it. But I have my own ideas about timelines. But if we can get it started in the best of ways, the continuity of that work, I think, and the responsibility of it will see to it that it is done. So, yeah, it's difficult, but I think it's also the silver lining part of it is where we are today, and how we carry that forward. It's like the old photos. I think people have touched on this. Where is it Curtis that did all those stoic photos? Some of them are on purpose misidentified too as which tribes, but everybody's stoic and sad and tragic, right? And because I guess there was reason to be. But there's this commentary that he left out all the pictures where they might be laughing, and just kind of carrying on lightheartedness, because that's how we are. That's how us Indian people are. So anyway, those are my thoughts right now so far on what we've heard. But the main point I wanted to drive home is that as you suspect, and this is for our non-Indian friends that are here, as you may suspect, we've been here a long time, but I wanted to drive that point home. Is it's longer than you think, and it's even longer than science thinks or is willing to accept, at least in academia. It's a long time, and so we've been custodian stewards. We've called this place home for so long, and we'll continue to, and that's why we're here as we move forward. So thank you.
Neto yet Pom Pahato, Ni Winamanan Boss. Hello, I'm from the Mudamamuntu tribe. Wanted to say a couple of things in regards to the genocidal words that you were saying. Maybe I'll stand up here because it's kind of cold. Warm it up real fast. Hold on. I wanted to talk about just real fast about the spiritual unrest that is happens from genocide places, and how to correct them, basically, and not wanting to leave that out of the conversation for these places, being a person that is involved in such things as prayers for rivers and whatnot. Some of the things that they say, of what I've heard, is that some of this spiritual unrest causes some of these things like wildfires, earthquakes, as well as mountain
Testing.
Thank you, and really sorry about that. Michelle?
Yeah, just going off of what has been said, I think it's important to recognize that this is the Truth and Healing Council. And really, to me, it's about the truth. And I think that's what the chairman was just speaking about, that we do know our truth. We know the truth. We know that we've been here and that we never left and we're not going to leave. We might move around and intermarry, and we have because of the boarding schools. And, you know, that's why I'm Kauai and Pit River. It's because of Sherman Indian Boarding School. And, you know, our people were taken there. But the truth has to recognize what was read. You know, what was read, including about the testimony, continues today. As an attorney working to protect sacred sites and our cultural places, a big hurdle is that people don't want to know the truth, and they don't accept our words, and they don't accept our history, and they override it by judges and by decision makers, and they say that, and archaeologists, and they say that we're wrong because they've proven otherwise. And that's the part that I hope maybe we can change, that our truth will be accepted as the truth, and it will be validated and received and upheld. We recently had a decision in a California District Court or California State Court, and other attorney here worked on that on a brief in the West Berkeley Shellmound case. And in that case, the worst possible scenario happened, where you have tribal people saying there's a site here and you have archaeologists saying there's not. And we shouldn't have a judge decide if the cultural site is there, because it is. It is. And to have a third party or a panel of judges be the one to decide, no, there's not a site here, is a worst possible outcome. And so hopefully we can find some truth, and then there can be healing. But I don't think we can have healing until we recognize the truth.
Just real fast, I'd like to kind of add on that. I think one of the most important things, even though we find this history unpleasant, it has to really be told, and it has to be received in the emotional context in which it happened. That doesn't make anybody happy. But in order to understand the truth, and in order to understand what your purpose is as a human being, you must understand what has happened, excuse me, to give you a foothold in the earth in which you live. Because you cannot go to the future. You cannot see a vision in the future. You cannot avoid the unpleasantries if you do not understand what has happened in the past. So please, don't be afraid of that. Nobody likes it, but it is part of your truth. So the more we talk about it, the more we can begin to see and to cleanse our own intangible spirit here, to move forward and make a better place in the universe for all of us.
Thank you, Council Member. I don't want to cut off the conversation, so we'll continue for a little bit longer.
I'll be brief. You know, I was talking to our people from my reservation at a tribal meeting, and I got up and said, take a look around you. I said, these are all your family. These are all people that we live here on this rancheria. And I want you just to remember and know that nobody outside of these boundaries of this reservation gives a damn about who you are or your needs or your life, but us. I care about you because you're my family. Your last name is this, your last name is that, but I knew your mom and your dad and your grandpas, and they knew me. And so I want you guys to know that our people were murdered and killed here in Lake County. There's a man by the name of Kelsey, whose town is named after him. And our Chief Augustine went over there because they took his wife, and they were starving all of our people, wouldn't let them hunt, took all their bows and all their implements to go out and hunt. They couldn't hunt. He would give them some beef and one little cup of barley. And so one of the kids didn't have enough for his mom. They wanted to go and ask for some more, so they took him and they beat him, whipped him, and then they killed him. That's our history. That's right here where I live, in the next town over. And that man's bones is there with a monument over it, entering into this town called Kelseyville. And so our Chief Augustine was the one that killed him. And because of that, Bloody Island massacre came, where the troops came in and killed women and children and stuff, and with their bayonets and their cannons, and our people were massacred. That's just one. There's over 300 different massacres happened in California. Some of them were more famous than others because the word has got out. And that's the reality. All the laws of this state are made by people who are non-natives. It's for their benefit, not ours, because that was the design. That's truth. So we have to accept that and know that that's what we're looking at when we try to bring healing. I know that you know that, but how many people in our reservation know that? What about the different generations that don't know that? They are experiencing that generational trauma that has been handed down, and it looks like drug abuse, women abuse, incest, and it looks like alcoholism. It looks like suicide. All these things are common on every rancheria. We know that, and we suffer because we said, man, I don't know how to help our people, but I want you to know you have it in you to help them. All they need is a champion, somebody stand up and say, you need to know about your culture. You know why we dance around this fire 4 times on this side and 4 times on that side? Because our Maru had that vision and built these heads in these different ways to dance. The songs came to her, and the songs are now the words that we're speaking when we're singing. We lay your henne, we lay your henne, we low your henne, ooh hui. And we start, just dancing. Because that's who we are. They called us Pomo people. Pomo, from a mine where they used to go and mine for magnesite. Mo is hole in our language. So Pomo is that mine, that hole. And not us, but they named the whole people of Pomo. A lot of our people have Pomo tattooed on them. And so, and they got them on their arms, and they got Pomo power and all this stuff. Our village is called Kabenapo. Kabe means rock. Napo means people, village. Kabenapo. We're rock people. The Indians didn't call, oh yeah, you're Pomo. No. That's the people that live over there by the rocks. That's who we are. And a lot of our people had villages on islands. And one of the names meant the Indian, the person runs across the island and falls in the water because it was so small. So that's what they say. You go to that place over there where they run across the island and they fall in the water. That was how they named those people. That's who we are. Our children don't know that. Generations below us don't know that. They need to have some bridge that they can understand and grab a hold of that. I was talking with Michelle over here, and I was talking with Joan about nicknames. I have an uncle named Frog. My Uncle Frog. Most people don't even know how he got that nickname. I was telling her about my Aunt Cuckle, because she used to wear a sweater, and when she walked through over to go and to visit people, the cuckleberries would hook onto her. She'd be walking around acting cute, and then they said, look at all these cuckleberries, so they named her Cuckle. How many people on my reservation don't know that? Not too many. From my generation down. And so there's a lack of that information from our elders moving down. There is a move, seems to be like in education, that elders are considered ready for the convalescent hospital. They don't have any value. And they can do it on their own because they looked it up on Google. They Googled it. So they know the songs now because they listen to the recordings at the museums. They know some of our culture, and now they become the experts. But they don't know why my aunt's called Cuckle. And they don't know, but they're making stuff up. And so there is a lot of information that has to be cleared up in our own rancherias and reservations. And you are the holders of that information. So it's on our shoulders to do that. So I encourage you to encourage your people to get back to their culture. Get back to being rock people. Not just Pomo and all those, you know how we are. Anyhow, and I know that there is healing. There is healing. I've seen little bits of it, and I've seen changes, and so I'm encouraged. And I know that I have chosen to do this in my lifetime. I go and I become a friend with somebody who is like the worst person you want to be around. He talked really bad about everything, and he's nasty. And anyway, he calls me his sensei because I always tell him, man, you got to quit doing that. And he says, well, I'm learning from you. You're my elder. I said, well, you don't listen to nothing I say. And so I keep at it. We go play bingo every Wednesday. He's with me. And so that's my project. That's how I'm doing it. And with the young people, every time I talk to them, I remind them of how our culture deals with different situations. And it's not the American way or the Mexican way or the black way. It's our way. I'm a Hintel man, and it's our way. It was given to us by Creator. Our people lived by it for thousands of years, and it's still working and still doing what it's supposed to do today. So I encourage all of us as elders, leaders, it's on our shoulders. Don't be ashamed. Bring it out. Talk about it. Be proud of who we are. I tell everybody, who would ever thought of making a whistle out of a leg bone of a bird? They blow it in ceremony. They dance. Beep. Shh. Shh. Where'd that come from? Creator. He gave that to our people. And not only that, to make baskets and all these things. That's a gift. That's something that's really to be proud of. That's who we are. We're people that look around and say, oh, we'll eat that acorn over there. That'll feed us. Where'd that come from? They're picking seeds and stuff and grinding them all up, putting some water and stuff, and they threw dirt in there with it too. Made bread, cooked it on hot rocks. That's our people who adapt to everything that is around us, and we just keep moving forward. So I encourage all of us to do the same, but be that source to talk to the next generations so they have an understanding of who we are. And our purpose here is to tend to this ground, these trees, and everything else around it. No matter what anybody says, that's our mandate. That's what we have to do. And to care for one another. Care for one another. It's not our tribe. It's not Pomo people. That's not our culture. Our culture is the lead man took care of the whole village. And if they didn't have enough, he'd give whatever he had to make it work. That attitude of taking care of their family. So we need to restore that. Oh.
Thank you. I don't think we can follow on that. I think that was a very, that wrapped this conversation very well, and it was very well spoken. And I think it's given us and this council a charge in what needs to happen and what needs to come out of this. And I think for those of you who are not from the community, it's given you a charge as well. And I hope that you've all thought a lot about what has been said here today. This conversation is going to continue. That's what is the charge of this council. And we hope that you will continue to follow along and to think about what's said here today and to process and think about how you can help, how you can make space, how you can do better, how you can reflect, how you can think about the blip that some of our council members have talked about today of the American occupation of this place and the collective intentional gaslighting effort that continues today, where our people can't go to court and can't tell what our truths are that we've known since forever. So I think with that thought, I'd like you all to continue to think on this, to continue to reflect. And Vice Chairman Myers, would you like to close us out with some final thoughts? You don't have to. That's okay.
This was the good, uncomfortable conversation I was hoping we could have today. Thank you. Thank you for the words. Heavy conversation. Heavy conversation. I would ask if you know how to say your prayers and send them off. That was probably a good time to do it. I hope that we can continue to have these conversations. We have more of them. Get deeper into what we all know. Continue to speak the truth. And my mind is swirling right now because there's good conversations that need to continue to happen. If it's okay, I'd like to maybe we could say a prayer and send folks if that's all right.